My name is Claire, and I was 29 years old the day my father's lawyer read the will out loud in a room that smelled like old coffee and regret. My brother got the house in Scottsdale. 4 bedrooms, a pool, a neighborhood where every lawn looked like a magazine cover. My sister got the investment accounts, nearly $200,000 split across 3 funds that had been quietly growing for years. And me? I got a note that said, "To my daughter Claire, I leave the Hargrove property in rural Tennessee. The deed is in the lockbox. I hope you understand someday." My brother laughed first. He actually laughed. He leaned back in his chair and said, "That old dirt patch? Claire?" I swear Dad always did have a sense of humor. My sister pressed her lips together in that thin smile she saves for when she thinks something is beneath her, and she said, "And I will never forget this as long as I live, don't worry. At least it matches your lifestyle. You always did love playing in the mud." She said it like it was a joke. She said it like I wasn't sitting right there. She said it like 29 years of being the one who drove 4 hours every weekend to help Dad after his first stroke, the one who learned how to manage his medications, the one who slept on his couch for 3 months after his second stroke, the one who held his hand in the hospital room at the end. She said it like none of that had happened at all. I didn't cry in that room. I waited until I was in my car in the parking lot, and then I let myself have 5 minutes. Just 5. Then I wiped my face, put the address into my GPS, and drove to Tennessee. The property was about 60 miles outside of Knoxville, at the end of a gravel road that my little Honda did not appreciate. It was late October and the trees were turning, and I remember thinking that the drive-in was actually beautiful in a way I wasn't expecting. And then I came around the last bend and I saw it, a farmhouse that had to be at least 100 years old, a collapsed barn off to the right, a rusted-out truck sitting in the weeds beside what used to be a chicken coop. The grass was knee-high. One of the porch steps was completely rotted through. I sat in the car for a long time. I almost called my sister right then and said, "Fine, you win. Tell me what you'll give me for it and we can be done." I had my phone in my hand. I was already thinking about what I'd say. But then I got out of the car instead. I don't know why. Some stubborn part of me, maybe the same part that drove 4 hours every weekend for 2 years, just made me get out and walk up to that porch and try the key from the lockbox. The front door opened, and the smell that came out was dust and cedar and something faint underneath that I couldn't name yet. I stepped inside. The house was a wreck, but it was a solid wreck. The bones were there. Wide plank hardwood floors under the dirt, a stone fireplace that took up most of one wall. Original windows that somehow hadn't been broken. Old furniture covered in sheets. And on the kitchen table, like my father had left it there on purpose, was a manila envelope with my name written on the front in his handwriting. Inside was a letter, and a survey map, and a folder from a geological consulting firm dated 8 months before he died. I sat down on the dusty kitchen floor and read everything twice. The property was 220 acres. I hadn't known that. I thought it was maybe 20, maybe 30. 220 acres, and according to the geological survey my father had quietly commissioned, the eastern portion of the land sat above a significant deposit of high-grade feldspar, the kind used in ceramics manufacturing, in glass, in electronics components. The consulting firm had estimated the mineral rights value in a range that made my hands shake when I read it. My father had known. He had known for 8 months and he hadn't told anyone. At the bottom of his letter, in the slightly unsteady handwriting of his last year, he'd written, "I didn't give you the easy thing, Claire. I gave you the real thing. You were always the one who knew how to work for what mattered. Don't let them talk you out of it." I folded that letter and put it in my jacket pocket, and I sat there for a long time in the quiet of that old kitchen. I drove back to Knoxville that night, checked into a cheap motel, and in the morning I started making calls. The first call was to a real estate attorney named Patricia Walsh, who had a small office downtown and a reputation, according to 3 different online reviews, for not backing down. I told her everything: the will, the survey, the geological report, the mineral rights. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Don't tell your siblings about the survey. Don't mention the mineral deposits to anyone. And get that deed transferred into your name as fast as we can move." I asked her why the urgency. She said, "Because the moment they find out what that land is worth, you're going to have a problem." I should have listened more carefully to exactly how she said that. We moved fast. I took 2 weeks off from my job. I worked remotely as a medical billing specialist, which meant I could do this, and I stayed in Knoxville while Patricia handled the deed transfer. I started getting quotes for the farmhouse repairs. I walked the property with a local contractor named Dale, who grew up about 20 miles away and knew the land, and he told me the farmhouse was salvageable, that the foundation was solid, that whoever built it in 1911 had built it to last. I started to feel something I hadn't expected. I started to feel like my father had been right. About 5 weeks after the will reading, my brother called me. He was friendly, which immediately made me careful. He said he'd been thinking, and he felt bad about how things had gone, and he wanted to have a conversation about the Tennessee property. He said he and my sister had talked, and they thought it might make more sense to sell it and divide the proceeds 3 ways rather than have it just sitting there. I said I wasn't interested in selling. He said he thought I was being sentimental and that I wasn't thinking practically. He said the property probably wasn't worth much and that I'd be better off with cash. He said this in the patient voice he uses when he thinks he's being reasonable and wants you to feel like you're being unreasonable. I said I appreciated him thinking of me and that I'd be keeping the property, and I ended the call. 3 days later, my sister called. She was not friendly. She said she'd done some research and she thought the will hadn't been handled properly and that she was going to look into whether Dad had been in the right state of mind when he made certain decisions. She said she had questions about undue influence. She said my name specifically when she said that phrase. I called Patricia immediately after and told her what my sister had said. Patricia was quiet for exactly 2 seconds and then said, "I was waiting for this. We need to file a cease and desist against both of them regarding the property, and I need you to gather every piece of documentation you have from your father's last 2 years, medical records, emails, anything." I had all of it. I had kept everything. 2 years of care coordination means 2 years of paperwork, and I had organized every single document in a filing system my father used to tease me about. I scanned it all and sent it to Patricia within 48 hours. Then I did something else. I called Dale and asked him to install security cameras on the property. 4 of them front entrance, back of the farmhouse, the barn area, and the eastern field. I did it quietly. I didn't mention it to anyone. Patricia sent the cease and desist letters. My brother's lawyer responded. My sister's lawyer responded. The language got formal and cold, and I printed every letter and added it to my files. For a few weeks, things went quiet. I went back to the property twice, met with a company that specializes in mineral rights leasing, and started to understand what I was actually sitting on. The numbers in that geological report had been conservative, it turned out. The feldspar deposit was larger than the initial survey suggested, and there was a second company that had already been quietly inquiring about acquiring mineral leases in that county. Patricia told me not to sign anything yet. She said wait. She said we needed the property fully secured first. That was when things went wrong. I drove out to the property on a Tuesday morning in late November and found the lock on the farmhouse door had been changed, not broken, changed. Someone had replaced the whole lock set with a new one, and my key no longer worked. There were fresh tire tracks in the gravel. And on the kitchen window, visible from outside, was a document taped to the glass. I pressed my face to the cold window and read enough to understand what it was. It was a deed. Someone had filed an amended deed claiming the property transfer was invalid. I called Patricia from the driveway. My voice was completely calm, and I don't know how. She told me to take photographs of everything, the tire tracks, the new lock, the document in the window, and to not touch or enter anything. She told me she would find out who filed that deed by end of day. It was my sister. She had found a notary in another county and a document that she had apparently altered my father's original property survey from 15 years ago, with some of the language around bequest modified. Patricia called it what it was: document fraud. Potentially, depending on how they'd done it, forgery of a legal instrument. Patricia contacted the county recorder's office. She contacted the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Unit. She contacted my sister's attorney with a letter that was, as she described it to me, not subtle. I want to be honest about how I felt during this period, because it wasn't triumphant. It was exhausting and frightening, and there were nights in that Knoxville motel room where I wondered if it was worth it, if I should just walk away, if the money and the fight and the sleepless nights were costing me more than any land was worth. I thought about my father's letter. I took it out and read it more times than I'll admit. You were always the one who knew how to work for what mattered. Patricia filed a motion to void the fraudulent deed. The county recorder's office, once they understood what had happened, moved with surprising speed. The cameras on the property had captured footage of a vehicle, my sister's car, which I recognized, and a second vehicle accessing the property on the evening before I found the changed lock. That footage went into the legal file. My sister's attorney, I found out later, advised her to stop. She didn't stop. She contacted the mineral rights company directly. I still don't know how she found out about them, though I suspect my brother, who had always been better at digging through public records than I gave him credit for, and she represented herself as a co-owner of the property with authority to negotiate. She sent them documents, fraudulent documents, with my name on them in a signature that was not mine. That was the moment it shifted from a civil matter to a criminal one. Patricia laid everything out for me on a Tuesday afternoon in her office. Forged deed, forged signature on a commercial document, fraudulent misrepresentation to a third party. She said the DA's office had been in contact. She said my sister was in serious trouble and that her attorney was likely telling her that right now. I asked Patricia what I should do. She said, "You've already done it. You documented everything from the beginning. You have the cameras. You have the original geological survey in your name. You have your father's letter. You have 2 years of care records that establish the relationship between you and your father. There's nothing left to do except let the process work." It took another 4 months. 4 months of legal back and forth, of my brother going very quiet and my sister's attorney filing and withdrawing motions, of Patricia working methodically through every challenge they raised. The fraudulent deed was formally voided by the court. The mineral rights remained entirely with the property, which remained entirely mine. My sister was charged. I won't go into every detail because it's still a matter I prefer not to dwell on. But she was charged with forgery of a legal instrument and fraud. She took a plea. She didn't go to prison, but she received probation and substantial fines, and she lost her real estate license, which had been the foundation of everything she considered herself to be. My brother called me after the plea was entered. He didn't apologize exactly. He said he thought things had gone too far, and he was sorry about how everything had happened. I told him I appreciated him saying so. We haven't spoken since. I signed a mineral rights lease in March. The leasing company is a legitimate operation, mid-sized, and Patricia reviewed every line of the contract before I touched a pen. The terms are good. They'll be extracting from the eastern portion of the property, which means the farmhouse and the surrounding land stays untouched, stays mine. Dale finished the farmhouse repairs in the spring. He replaced the rotted porch steps first, which felt right. The kitchen got new countertops, but we kept the original cabinets because they were solid oak and there was no good reason to replace them. The floors cleaned up beautifully. The stone fireplace worked perfectly once we had the chimney swept. I moved in on the 1st of May. I sat on the repaired porch that first evening and watched the light go gold through the trees and listened to the quiet, which is a different kind of quiet than anything I'd known before. Not empty quiet, full quiet, the kind that has insects in it and wind and the... I thought about my father a lot that first week. I thought about that letter and what it had taken for him to see me clearly enough to write it. I thought about the 4-hour drives and the medication charts and the nights on his couch. I thought about sitting in a dusty kitchen on a dirty floor reading a geological survey with shaking hands and deciding not to call my sister. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty about what happened to her. I have thought about this carefully and I want to be honest. I feel sad about it. Sad that she made the choices she made. Sad that greed did what it did to her. But guilty? No. She had every opportunity to stop. She had lawyers telling her to stop. She chose not to. The consequences that came were the consequences of her own choices, not mine. My father left me the real thing. The hard thing, the complicated thing, the thing that required work and patience and a filing cabinet full of documents and a Patricia Walsh who didn't back down. I understood eventually. I think I understood even sitting in that dusty kitchen, before I'd finished reading, before I knew what any of it would cost me or what it would become. He gave me the thing that would require me to be exactly who I already was. And I was enough.